Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to guide the state of Israel. Thank you so much to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. It's a great privilege to be able to bring you really behind the headlines, what is happening here in Israel. And I'm very happy to be joined today by Danny Seaman, who is a fan favorite. Danny, thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure, as always.
Danny, maybe we'll start and you can just provide a general update about what is happening in this war and your thoughts of what's going on right now.
Okay, I think if you've been following the news, the big news here in Israel today has been things that happened actually yesterday, was the taking out of a terrorist cell, if you want to call it, a group of terrorists who ended up also being, and I mention it this way deliberately because it ended up being the sons of Haniya. And there was some talk here in Israel by some of the media that the Prime Minister's office was not informed, and the chief of staff, not the chief of staff, the Minister of Defense was not informed about this. People have to realize this is a normal procedure, especially now in a time of war. When the intelligence and when the Shabak, the Israeli internal security, when they get information regarding an immediate threat by a terrorist group, and they got real-time intelligence in Gaza yesterday, they have to operate immediately because they knew that these people were planning an attack. And we know that there were weapons in there, and they did what was necessary at that point, taking them out. After they were taken out, we discovered it was three of Ismail Haniya, one of the leaders of Hamas, who is in Qatar at the moment, was three of his 13 children. And apparently three of their children, meaning that they took, going for this terrorist operation, they used human shields, their own children. And they were all killed in this incident as well. And you have the dry, what I mean by dry is the factual information given by some of the Israeli media, but then you have those Israeli media who have a political inclination and are trying to, in any way possible, make the government look bad, giving their interpretation of the events. So there were two things they said here. One was, how was the Prime Minister not informed? And second, was the fact that because Haniya is supposedly involved in the negotiations, this was done in somehow to disrupt the negotiations going on, had nothing to do with the negotiations. It's an ongoing event. And I can tell you more than this. The public in Israel, whether or not this was, even if this was not known in advance, the fact that Haniya was, his family and immediate family were hit, more power to them. We are very clear on this, that the leaders of Hamas, the general public here in Israel, the leaders of Hamas, whether they're in Gaza or abroad, and anybody affiliated with them, and Haniya's family is a terrorist family, they are targets. And we will take them out either now, as the war is going on, or in the future, but every single one of the people involved with the October 7th atrocities will eventually, we'll provide them with what their greatest goal is, as Haniya himself said yesterday, is to be shaheeds. We're more than happy to accommodate them on that. So this was the major news item today in Israel. It was followed up on the news here. Whether or not it affects it, it really has no effect on the negotiations. The negotiations themselves are basically the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the Americans trying to make some kind of deal. Israel accepted all the conditions, though they were very, very difficult for Israel. I think this was raised in the past yesterday and day before yesterday on the briefings here. Israel accepted it. It's the Hamas who are playing games. It's the Hamas acting as if they have some say. They said they'll make their own proposal. Now we know more or less where that is going. And I say this, I have a morning show on Galei Israel radio in Israel twice a week. And I've said this there, and I'm saying it here as well. Hamas, unless they have no other choice, and right now they have other choices, unless they have no other choice, they're not going to release the hostages. They're going to do everything in their power to make us miserable, knowing how this affects us, not only the families, it affects the entire society here. When they see the tensions in our society that are a consequence of these negotiations, they're more than happy to increase it. So unfortunately, unless there's no other choice, they're going to continue with making us miserable through these supposed negotiations. The other issue today was that the operations, though Israel withdrew most of its forces and its operational forces out of Gaza last night, the Israeli Air Force and the tactical units were in Gaza and were addressing terrorists trying to infiltrate the center of Gaza, areas that we had left earlier or that we had taken over earlier, and our forces moved out without giving them permission to move into these areas. So I'll tell you, my assessment of this is that very much after the, I'm just putting things together. After the operation in Shifa Hospital, I believe that Israel was looking for a way to get these rats to get out of their hiding places and give them the false sense of security. And very much the way we did it in Shifa, moving out of these areas, at least taking our tactical forces out, we have other ample ability of gathering intelligence from these areas, letting them try and believe that they can strike at Israel. And it gives us, instead of just sitting there and trying to fish them and trying to get them out, we're letting them pop out and taking them out as they do that. So the amount of intelligence we have on the ground, I don't want to say anything and reveal any of our, not only the tactics, but also our abilities. I can just say that Israel has ample abilities there right now, gathering for information that allows us. And I know people like the dramatics of having forces on the ground and having our forces there. We can put the impressions aside. What we're looking for is tactical advantages, and this gives us a tactical advantage there. In addition to that, one of the major money people of the Hamas were taken out by our Air Force, and we're striking them very much and similar to what we're doing with the Hezbollah in Lebanon at the moment. Another issue that was just this afternoon, the IDF released that the IDF representatives of the IDF and Kogat, which is our the organization within the military with the outreach to civilian organizations, met with the Red Cross, USAID, United Nations, and other organizations that are funneling the aid to the Gazans in the Rafah area. Met with them for two reasons. First off, to see if there are any needs that they have, because there's a lot have been said, and the President of the United States, day before yesterday, spoke to Netanyahu and said that he wants us to pay more attention to this. So we're paying more attention to it to see if there were no other needs. They've said what is happening at the moment is fine by them, but also in light of what happened last week with the unfortunate incident with the aid workers there, they met for two reasons also, following up with that to increase the connection and the contact. The investigation and the follow-up revealed that Hamas, and I don't know if this was presented in the briefing day before yesterday, Hamas were taking advantage of their ability to, as I said, we have intelligence gathering information there. And when we saw the Hamas operatives, they went on these vehicles, they created an impression that this was a terrorist operation, and it created a misunderstanding on the part of Israel, which is unfortunate. As I said last week, these things happen in war. As terrible as it is, it's happened to the British, it's happened to the Americans. With all due respect, it's happened with us ourselves here in Israel, even during this war, and even with the hostages. There were 3 hostages who were able to escape and unfortunately misidentified by the IDF, and they were killed in a very terrible and heart-wrenching incident. So these things happen in war. So I know that people tend to be critical, but please, if these things happen in your own country, don't single out Israel for criticism that you don't even direct against yourself. So those are the 3 major events in the war going on at the moment. Here in Israel, there's another incident going on that is creating an uproar here. One of the Nukhba. Nukhba are those who were involved personally in the attack on October 7th. One of the prisoners who were taken had a medical emergency oh my God, his sugar levels started to rise, and he was taken to a hospital, but taken to one of the major hospitals in Israel. A family, a person who lost his daughter back in a terrorist attack on January 2017, Herzl Hajjaj, heard about this. He went to the hospital, expressed his outrage over the fact that they're being treated in our hospitals instead of being treated in military installations. Apparently, the military took him out and reported to the public here that they were taken to a military hospital installation, medical installation. But apparently today it's found out that they were taken to a hospital in Ashdod. And people are furious about this. And with all due respect, these are not prisoners. They're not military personnel. These are terrorists, and the worst kind of terrorists. Personally, I'd say give the bastards aspirin and let them work it out. And if it doesn't work, then they die. It's a shame, but we don't owe them a damn thing. So people here in Israel are really pissed off at this, and really this is an issue that is absolutely intolerable right now. So this will be another issue that we're going to be addressing later on. These people should not be treated in hospitals. Let's put it simply at that. So those are the major news items here referring to the security situation.
Danny, thank you so much for sharing all of that, and also sharing some of the emotion that people here in Israel are feeling. You are absolutely not alone in that. Thank you to all of our viewers who are sending in the questions now, who are sending the questions in before the briefing. Danny, I have a question for you, really something that you shared with me earlier today. My kids are coming home from school this week with the message from their school that they're supposed to bring home all of their books for Pesach break, because Iran might be retaliating. And therefore, and it's not just my kids, many kids are coming home from school with this message that we don't know, will school be in session after the Pesach break because of the retaliation of Iran? And I know you have a very strong opinion on using that word, that there was this incident in Syria and now Iran is retaliating and Israel is bracing for the retaliation of Iran. Can you share with our viewers what you told me earlier today?
I should have mentioned this also. It's one of the major issues going on and events happening here in Israel at the moment is the expectation or the threats coming from Iran. Now, this is not a retaliation. We've been at war with Iran indirectly since October 7th through their proxies. That means Hamas, Hezbollah, Iraqis through Syria, and also the Houthis in Yemen. These are all organizations that were funded, trained, and directed by Iran. Iran is very much involved in everything that is happening here. For years, they have been involved in Syria, in positioning themselves in Syria, not only helping the Syrians themselves, but also positioning themselves along the border with Israel and operating their operatives. It's not only the Hezbollah in Lebanon, there are other forces, Shia forces that are operating there. So Iran is in direct, they're taking a back seat and playing to try to keep themselves out of this. But over the years, we have taken out, with very accurate intelligence, Iranian-backed or Iranian-supported installations in Syria and in Lebanon. And last week, we did take out their person who was the commander of all these forces. And they've sworn that they're going to get back at Israel. Well, with all due respect, we're in the midst of a war. We understand, and the public in Israel here is something else that people have to understand. For years, and I've mentioned, my family are from Ashkelon. I grew up there. I'm there every weekend. The people in the south, in Ashkelon, in Sderot, in Netivot, we're all familiar with the facts. In the past 20 years since we left Gaza Strip, there have been incidents there of escalations, periods of escalations, and the public have always said, in these areas, we're willing to take what it's necessary, we'll be in our shelters, we'll do everything, but finish it for once and for all. And unfortunately, Israel did not do this, and then we paid the price of October 7th, which a lot of it is, and these are still things that are going to be investigated, but the public have always said that, and they even they meet it 10 times more at the moment. Because after what we went through, it's not only in the south of Israel, throughout Israel, Israelis understand right now and are willing to take whatever is necessary in order to finish the threat, the existential threat that we're under at the moment, and that includes Iran. And the international community has to understand this, that Iran is a threat not only to Israel, because the Houthis are also disrupting the traffic of the ships in the south, in the areas around Saudi Arabia and Africa and the African Peninsula. So they are a threat to Western civilization. Now, if you take this and you take ISIS, who have been threatening now also to take action, not only in Russia, but also in Europe itself, and they're threatening the soccer matches, the European Championship games that are happening. They've said they're going to have an attack there. They're also supported by Iran. And Iran may try to do something with Israel. We're expecting it. I don't know what they're going to be doing, if they're going to do it directly, they're going to do it through proxies. But this is not a retaliation. This is an escalation of the war against Israel, and we'll respond in kind. The Prime Minister said this today, that we have abilities, we have the knowledge, and the less said, better on this. Let's put it this way. Also, not to create hysteria. There's no reason for that. If anybody has to be hysteric, and I think they've learned that from the attack last week, when it was a super secret meeting of the heads of the Iranians, and somehow we knew about it. And the same way we knew about Hania's, well, we didn't know it was his son, but we knew about that, the terrorist attempt there. And I think they're the ones who should be concerned right now. And so should be the international community. And don't give us any of this nonsense about the negotiations going on. Look, with all due respect to the negotiations, it is not about Hamas, and it is not about the Arabs in Gaza. It is about the fact that Israel was attacked. There was a ceasefire the day of October 6th. They not only violated this, they perpetrated one of the worst massacres in the Western world in this new century. And so we have 137, I just heard something from the United States, sources in the United States saying that they're not sure how many of our hostages are still alive. So those people who were so worried this week about prisoners being held by Israel, or Israel taking out members of the Hezbollah and Hamas, with all due respect to all of you, there are women, children, elderly, and young Israelis being held against their will. No country in the world would have tolerated this, and we don't know what their condition is right now. And instead of the outrage being directed to that, all these bleeding hearts are outraged over what Israel is doing. None of this would have happened if Israel was not attacked. And we owe an explanation to nobody over this. Unfortunately, I'm saying we have made it we have put the onus and the emphasis through not insisting on the focus being on our people. And I've said this before, and I'm saying this again, it's despicable and it's disgusting. And all these people in Ireland and in Scotland and in Canada and in the United States who feel it necessary to speak about all these people, if you wasting your money and being more responsible for the money, but the billions, tens of billions of dollars spent to help the poor Palestinians in Gaza, and instead it went to build the operational to try to have a genocide against Israel, only we're no longer the helpless Jews from 75, 80 years ago. And I have no apologies about that. Commemorations on Holocaust Memorial Day that you're going to have in a few weeks from now. I'd much rather you criticize us and condemn us and have your marches in the streets than commemorate us. And most Israelis share my opinion on this. So with all due respect, we don't care what you think about it. Sorry.
Danny, I feel like you're getting a full workout over there while I'm sitting here relaxed and not burning any calories. Let me ask you a question. Since the beginning of this war, there have been reports that at least 240 U.S. military assets have been attacked directly by Iran in Syria and Iraq. Do you think that the Western world and that the U.S. doesn't appreciate the fact that they're being targeted as well? Are they trying to ignore that? Do they just not understand that this is not only Israel being attacked, but the U.S. itself?
A few weeks ago, you had a young woman here who is Sudanese, who her family found refuge, Christians who found refuge in Israel. And she was saying how this reminded her about the story. She was too young to experience it, but the stories that her mother tells her about what Christians in Sudan have experienced, they're still experiencing at the moment. In Nigeria, the same thing is happening. There's no occupation there. There's no colonialization, but they're Muslims attacking Christians in Nigeria. It's happening throughout Africa. It happened to Christians in Iraq in the past few years through ISIS. So all these things are happening, which proves that this is not a Western colonization issue, and it's not an Israeli issue. And yes, 250 or some, I don't know the exact number, of American and Western targets have been targeted by Iran. And there's this appeasement attitude going on, which, have we not learned anything from World War II? Have we not learned anything? The appeasement does not work with them, does not work with these kind of organizations. And they're not hiding it. They're saying it precisely. And by the way, it's not only them. It's extreme Muslims in Europe and in the United States that are celebrating not only what happened on October 7th, but are celebrating everything that they see happening. And they're saying it very clearly, that eventually they're going to induce Sharia law in Britain, in France, in the United States. Don't believe me, listen to them. Israelis made the mistake of not listening to the Hamas. Israelis made the mistake of not listening to the PLO. And the same attempt to create a PLO-led autonomous body or recognize them here is a fatal mistake. And by the way, an absolute majority of Israelis will have nothing to do with that. And I highly recommend that you not listen to your mainstream media who are taking their cues from Israeli media, who are all doing the same thing here. Everybody's saying that Israelis are being affected by the American administration because the messages from the left wing here and from the American liberals are very much the same. No, it's not coming from the Americans. There are Israelis here who are pumping this message, and the Americans are echoing it. And they're getting it also from their media. But for the years that I worked with the media here, they all work in an echo chamber. And that echo chamber, they're all there working with the people that they share the same kind of political opinions. And with this activity of theirs and this kind of echo chamber that they believe that this is the truth. But today you have through social media other options. And I say, join Israelis, average Israelis. See what they're posting, see what they're talking about, and many of them share the same thing here. Now, what you hear about is demonstrations. They fail. These demonstrations to topple the government have not been successful. And the attempts on parts of these activists here in Israel to try to create tensions in Israel and have a response didn't work because most Israelis are behaving responsibly. They understand that this is not the time for these kind of things. And they're not going to be dragged into a conflict or kind of a civil war that some Israeli politicians are hoping to happen. And what you're getting is an echo for them. So I just saw this week that Bret Stephens in the New York Times, which is not surprising that the New York Times, Bret Stephens is a bit disappointing, but not the New York Times. They're all pumping the same kind of message. This is not the attitude of most Israelis. And don't forget that. What Israelis want is an end to Hamas, what the Prime Minister is saying. And by the way, the Prime Minister is responding to the demand of the public here. We want an end to Hamas. There's not going to be rounds of fighting going on anymore. There are not going to be missiles fired anymore. We're not going to have the situation where 200,000 Israelis are uprooted right now. And nobody talks about them because Israel is doing the responsible thing and taking care of them. We're putting them up, we're housing them, we're giving them financial aid. The billions of dollars that the Arabs received in Gaza could have done the same thing for them. But nobody mentions the 200,000 Israelis who've been uprooted for over 6 months now. So all of these things are a perspective that people are trying to go back to the 6th of October with the same nonsense that happened there. And again, I go back to what I said before, the analogy to World War II. We learned then that you cannot appease extremists. And it's unfortunate that so many people don't understand that today.
Danny, thank you for sharing all of this. And I'll just share with all of our viewers, if you like what Danny is saying and you want to bring him to a community near you, either in person or via a private Zoom call meeting with your community, please reach out. And this passion and this knowledge you can have with you and your community and engage more directly with Danny. Danny, let me ask you one final question. We're almost running out of time. Every time you join me, I feel like we have to extend these briefings by 3 hours. There's so much to talk and you have so much to share. But just to clarify, the mainstream media here in Israel, the mainstream media, has it changed since October 7th? Is it more understanding of what is going on and what needs to be? You have 3 minutes, unfortunately, to address the mainstream media here in Israel.
You know what? When I started seeing this problem with the media back 20 years ago, when I worked with the government press, just started working with the government press office, people didn't know what I was talking about. Today, through the advent of social media, people understand the whole concept of fake news. I wrote a whole book about that. The publisher didn't like the term fake news, so we just called it the very boring title, Israel and the Foreign Media. But today people understand that, so I don't have to go to... Media have become political operatives, and unfortunately too much for the extreme left wing. And most of them do not. They try to continue presenting that. There has been a tremendous change in Israel. We had our concerns about the Oslo process back, even though we had suicide bombings and everything, but it's clear to us today. Oslo not only failed the Arabs in Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip, those that the world claimed to be so-called Palestinians, which is also a way to undermine Israel by creating the impression of some other people that lived here. So all these things, it failed miserably. And we cannot go back to this. We're not, because it's the lives of our children are at stake. And they continue to say that. They celebrate October 7th. And those who want to do it, go live with them, you do that. We're not going to take those chances anymore. So the media, unfortunately, continue with the same thing. They changed for a while, but they're under the misunderstanding that perhaps some Israelis are open to that mess. No, it's not going to happen. Some people will deny everything and ignore the truth and ignore the facts that they see. And unfortunately, some people continue doing with that. Going back to that, I can't blame them for it because they can't believe that some people will be so evil. But most of us see that evil, and I look at my children and I say that we will not have them helpless or make the mistakes of doing stupid mistakes like we did 30 years ago with Oslo.
Danny, thank you for sharing all that. I feel like we need to do a study on if the mainstream media hasn't shifted during this war, but the people have, if that is creating any disconnect or drop in ratings, so to speak, with those media channels. But we're out of time. So Danny, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of this. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you next week, Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.